from the CyberHub bunker and studio. You're listening to the CISO Talk Podcast. No sales, no bullshit, just straight talk. Straight talk. And now for your host and CISO, James Azar.
Whoa, blow it up. CISO Talk time in Veteran November. I've got the one, the only. He goes by Paul Love, but I kind of like to say Paul Louvet, make it very fancy. CISO over at Co-op Financial Services. Paul, welcome to Veteran November, buddy.
Thanks so much. I appreciate it.
It's so awesome to have you on. Before we get started with Paul, though, and we talk a little bit about his military experience, if you have not subscribed to our CISO Talk podcast or CyberHub podcast, do so right now. If you're watching us on YouTube, I'm so close to monetizing YouTube, folks. So close. So please just subscribe to my YouTube channel. Begging you, please, to do so right now. You get all of our content, and make sure you turn on the bell. All of our content can be found on our website at cyberhubpodcast.com as well. And without further ado, Paul, welcome to the show. I've done enough self-promotion, right? Like, you know what would have been worse right there? Like a vendor pitch, right? Like, and by the way, are you looking for firewalls?
Yeah, exactly. No, that's one good thing is, the no vendor approach. So like that.
Yeah. People have to listen to the, people will listen to the ads before we get started, kind of like Joe Rogan does it, right?
Yeah.
Like everyone knows when you listen to Joe Rogan, like you skip like 6-7 minutes, right? And then you realize you're in the episode.
Yeah. It's the right way to do it.
Yeah, it is what it is. Paul, welcome to the show. Thank you so much. We've overcame all of, how many CISOs does it take to get a podcast episode recorded virtually? Apparently 2.
At least 2.
At least 2.
At least 2.
We've overcame all of our technical issues, and we've had a great conversation before we started recording. And so this is Veteran November, folks, a month where we thank our veterans for their service. I'm highlighting this month all of the veterans that are Infosec for the month of November. I'll be doing this, by the way, every single November going forward. Like every November, 26 veterans come on the show. I know 30 days in November, but it's 4 Saturdays. Take Saturday off. Paul and I were talking about that. Spend time with your family, with your friends. Read a book. Turn off notifications. Just unplug if you can. Paul, you've been in cyber for a very, very long time. You said 30 years. Yep.
Just about, yeah. And actually, I was in before. I don't count the time in middle school where I programmed my first Atari 65XE/800, where I created like a little security program on there. So I was an Atari person, not an Apple person. I love Apple now, but yeah.
Well, so I mean, Atari's Atari, right?
Oh yeah. I could do amazing things on Atari. I actually was looking at buying another one just for the fun of it, to go back and manually program line by line from old magazines and spend 18 hours to, program something that just moves across the screen. It was a great time when I was a kid.
So my wife and I are on a 90s movie kick.
Oh. So
Atari is heavy in early 90s movies. Like anything from like 1988 to like 1995, 96, heavy Atari. Then it kind of gets into PlayStation.
Yeah, which things changed it's like the Coke and Coca-Cola and Pepsi, right? You could tell everybody was on one side. You were either an Atari person or an Apple person. So in our school, right, we had Apples and Ataris, and the kids like me who couldn't afford an Apple at home, I went to the Atari one because I knew I could afford that. So yeah, it was just an interesting dynamic. We would all have little competitions with each other and so forth. Good times, good memories.
Indeed, good memories to be had. Paul, let's talk a little bit about your military service. What branch of the service did you serve in, and how long did you serve overall?
So I was in the Marine Corps, and I was in for 8 years. I decided to do 2 tours, right? So I re-enlisted once, and loved the entire time. But as you know, if you do more than 10 years, right, now once you get past that 3rd enlistment, you might as well stay for 20. So for me, it was a tough decision, but I loved every minute in the Marine Corps.
So Semper Fi, I'd be a fool if I didn't say that. So that's great. So tell us a little bit about, did you learn cyber? Were you in cybersecurity in the Marine Corps, or kind of was cyber something you kind of fell into after?
I actually went in with the desire to be in intelligence, so cyber, and I signed up for that, right? I went in, focused on IT and security at the time. So when I went into boot camp, I already knew what I was going to do when I got out. So, I've been in cyber since the day I got out of boot camp and went to my A school, my secondary school.
In the Army, we call that AIT. Just like
we got to have some competition here.
Yeah,
a little bit of friendly rivalry.
It's okay. I mean, I will say this, that a lot of people always feel like the military is so divided, right? Like Army, Navy, Marine, Air Force, and I'm like, listen, we all may have competition, but we all equally hate the Air Force. Like, that's just universal.
Well, we all have our friendly rivalries, even in the naval service, right? I mean, the Marines and the Navy. I mean, it's like different football teams. They all respect each other and they all respect what they do, but in the end, they have to have a little competition. But yeah, it was a lot of fun working with. I got to work with a lot of Army and Air Force and Navy people in my field, and you see a lot of the same traits throughout the different branches. But again, you still have to have a little bit of a rivalry because the Marine Corps uniform, our dress blues, were amazing. So
it was very interesting because when you're in MEPS, like right before you deployed for basic, right? You're in a hotel, and everyone that's in that hotel with you the night before you deploy, they're from all branches of the military, right? So you've got Air Force, Marines, Navy, Army, and I enlisted in the Army, but that's because I thought that the Marine basic training was just too hard.
Well, and long, 13 weeks, right? We were twice as long as everybody else.
Yeah, but that's why the Marines, irregardless of rivalry or not, are the baddest of the bad.
Yeah, and that's actually, it's an interesting story because I was actually in Air Force Junior ROTC in high school, and I was going to go into the Air Force. And I had scheduled an appointment with the Air Force recruiter, and he didn't show up, or he was late. I don't know what happened, but the Marine saw me there and said, do you have what it takes to be one of us? Are you good enough? I'm like, oh, that's an interesting sales pitch. Usually you get somebody coming in and say, oh, you should come try this. It's like, and the thing I really appreciate about the Marine Corps and the Marine was we're not going to give this to you. If you don't earn it, you're not good enough, and you're gonna be out, right? Only if you want a challenge. Otherwise, don't bother. Get out of my office. It's like, wow, I've never been challenged like that before, and that's what really pushed me to join the Marines. But I was actually on my way to be in the Air Force, which they had some great technology and some capabilities, so definitely respected that. But for me personally, I think the Marine Corps helped change who I am a lot.
Yeah, the Marine Corps has a specific set of, I don't want to say standards, but more people drop out of the Marine Corps boot camp than any other boot camp combined. That is also
we saw a lot of people leave.
Yeah.
We saw a lot of people leave. Just it's not for everybody, right? You gotta love it, and it's actually a lot like cybersecurity, right? You see people get into the field because it's like, oh, hey, there's money here, and it's it seems interesting. But when you do it for a long enough period, like you and I have, or any CISO, you realize that it's not. You got to love this job because there are some days that are exceptionally frustrating. That it's just like, what am I doing, right? And that's a lot like for me, the Marine Corps or the military in general, right? You're not going into it for money. If you're going into it for money, you're choosing the wrong reason, right? You need to focus on what are you trying to accomplish personally and externally. So yeah, it's a great parallel.
I think you make more money as a terrorist than you do in the military.
Oh yeah, well that's one reason I left. Right, is like I was actually eligible for welfare as a sergeant, and for me it's like, okay, I need to make sure I can take care of the family. But I mean, I would go back in a second. I love the Marine Corps and the military, and the camaraderie was amazing.
So let's talk a little bit about that transition from military to civilian. That's one of the hardest. You and I talk to a lot of veterans, I'm sure, and we mentor a lot. And, the hardest part for a lot of those guys is the transition from military to civilian. It's, getting your CV in order. There's a lot of different challenges there, right? From mindset to so many others. Tell me a little bit about, and if you don't mind sharing with us a little bit about kind of what was that transition like for you, what were some of the things that you failed at that we can learn from, and what were some of the things that you did very well in that transition?
Yeah, so over my career, luckily, I when I got out of the Marines, I went into a company that the person that was managing me was former Air Force. Amazing, amazing leader. Loved him. And he understood like what that transition was, because coming straight out of the military, it's hard to break habits, especially if you were in for 8 years like I was, and enlisted especially, and Marine, if you add that, right? Everyone's sir, ma'am. It's very rigid. While you can think independently, if you get an order, you take it. You don't question, right? You do. You disagree and commit. But the thing that I think I learned, the transition wasn't hard for me personally, and that's because I had an amazing manager who was willing to guide me and understood some of the things that I was dealing with. So, for instance, when I went to my second or third company, I still think I called people sir and ma'am. And for a long time, I thought that was just a sign of respect. And finally, someone just told me, hey, in the civilian world, that actually makes people feel uncomfortable. And it makes, people don't want you, to do those honorifics, right? They just want to have conversations with you. So it actually took me a long time to get out of that habit. Another one was the fear, the right word for it is more of feeling like I had enough skill sets behind me or enough certifications or education to be able to speak competently in a room. So, over my career, I have multiple certifications, multiple degrees after I got out of the military, books, etc. But anytime I'd walk in a room, I'd always feel like I don't quite know enough. If I just go and got my PhD, or if I wrote one more book, or if I did one more thing, then I would be able to, I could speak confidently. And I think that was kind of, for me personally, it was a military type of transition where the more stripes you had, the more people respected your opinion. And, it took me a while to realize that the rank and the honorifics and the titles and all of that don't really mean much, especially in the civilian world. It's about the ideas you bring and being confident enough to speak to those. And, actually that probably took me 10, 15 years to figure out. I mean, I would still walk into rooms and be like, oh, okay, these people are all smarter than me. Why should they take my opinion when I was the security person? And so that was part of the transition. The other one was the language. And what I mean by that is acronyms. Right. I became very accustomed to acronyms, and now I'm very averse to using acronyms. And actually, I tell my teams, acronyms are the language of exclusion, right? You use and business leaders don't want to hear about DLP and all the different acronyms we have in our field. They want to understand, what are you trying to say? Well, this tool can monitor for certain key things that we're looking for, whether it be personally identifiable information or whatnot, right? So being able to speak very plainly was really important. In the military, you speak very plainly too, but you have that special language, right? Of everybody knows all the different DD-214, right? I mean, everybody just knows what that is. But in the civilian world, it's totally different. So those are the three things I think that took me the longest. And sometimes I'll walk into a room and be like, do I have enough knowledge? But I think what I've come away with over the years is that I have to be comfortable with what I don't know. And that took a lot of self-reflection. And so when I walk into a room and I don't know something, I'm absolutely comfortable saying, hey, I don't know the answer to that. Talk to me, dumb it down a little bit for me, and let's figure this out together.
Yeah, there's a piece to not knowing something. I think in the military, like you said, we speak in a lot of acronyms. Everything's an acronym. Everything's got a shortcut. Like, you don't go get breakfast. We're going to chow, right? Yeah. Like it's chow time. Like everything is kind of like cut down. I can't recall, but there was like a comedy skit. I think it was in The Office. I think it was one of the episodes of The Office where, what's his name? Kevin Malone speaks in shortcuts. He goes, bathroom now. And they're like, Kevin, you can't, eat now. Right? And Michael's trying to explain to Kevin, you got to use full sentences. And Kevin Mullen's like, but why? I'm saving time, and with all this time I'm saving, I can be so much more productive.
It doesn't quite work that way.
Right. And I remember watching that and going, wow, that's like the military, right? Like, we were always talking in code and squadrons, and some Hollywood movies were able to get that done right. Like, you go 3 clicks up and then, hang a left and then a right and then go into the building up the second, like it is true that the language barrier when people leave is very challenging. The yes ma'am, no ma'am, I still do that today.
Yeah, it's a hard habit to break. Yeah.
Well, if you're in front of the board, right? Like, it's very hard for you to look at the board and go, sure, Jerry, what was that? Like, you go, yes, sir. Like, especially when they're asking you questions. If you're like, I think we learn collectiveness and calmness and handling stressful situations. And when we're in that situation, let's say we're in front of the board or we're in a really important or big meeting, right? You almost, I think for me, I automatically revert to my training and then I go, yes, sir. No, sir.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Because that's where you get your calm and your cool from. I didn't get it from a civilian. Like, it wasn't from a college campus. It was from, real life experience in the military. And, no matter what you were going through in the military, it was yes, sir, no, sir.
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
But
no,
it
ma'am.
actually makes civilians very uncomfortable and I've had people tell me, outside the military that it actually makes them feel uncomfortable, right? Like you're elevating them above you or, it's unneeded. It's an unneeded thing. And, it took, again, I do it. I still say it sometimes, but I've gotten used to being very comfortable with who I am. And when I talk to boards or, senior leaders, calling their first name is still respectful. It's what I've learned is it's the tone of how you talk to people,
right,
not necessarily the words, and making sure that your tone is appropriate shows that respect that people are due.
So talk a little bit about your civilian journey to your current role as a CISO. I've had several CISOs so far this month. I've tried to have one a week, and then highlight all the other positions that exist within InfoSec. But talk a little bit about how you got started, where you got started, and then where'd you go from there, and how long you've been in your current role, and what's that like?
Sure. So, I got started right after I got out of the military in a Unix system administration / security job. And, I've actually moved around to a lot of different organizations. So I've worked at Freddie Mac, Microsoft, Ernst & Young, Schlumberger, right? I mean, a whole bunch of different company, Ally Bank, and so forth. So my journey has been to find the challenges. And that's what I've tried to do throughout my career is try to find where there's a challenge, where something needs to be, a program needs to be implemented or fixed. And I've discovered about myself that I'm a builder primarily. I can maintain, but I'm primarily a builder. And when a role becomes a maintainer role, that's when I go, okay, hey, I've done what I need to do, and I move to the next role. So, I've worked in primarily financial services and worked from, a system administrator to a manager of security operations to a director, and both highly technical and then more of the governance, risk, and compliance aspect as well. And I think all of those things help me to eventually become a CISO, right? Because and something I tell people that I'm mentoring is a lot of people want to go into pen testing, the very deep technical portion. They want to start their career that way, and there's nothing wrong with that. But if you want to be a CISO, I would suggest and recommend that you try other parts of the field, right? So, I was talking to one person, and I recommended, they were highly technical, and I actually recommended to them to try GRC out, to try the governance, risk, and compliance out, to understand why the things they were doing, the things they were doing, not just to do it, like to run a red team or something, but there's a reason why. What's the regulatory requirement? What's the standards and so forth? So, all those experiences within security, different aspects of security from the system administration and so forth have, I think, enabled me to understand enough about security to be a CISO and to build programs. But as you and I were talking earlier, that's the thing I love about this is you're always learning. So even though I'm in this role, I just recently went and got some forensics certifications. And that's just because, one, I want to stay technically competent, but two, I need to understand how things work so that when I'm working with my teams, I know what the capabilities are, and I can work with the teams.
That's such a very fascinating leadership thing to do, and I'm like, I really want to dig there, but I know that we'll go down a rabbit hole, and we don't have that much. These episodes are 30 minutes. This isn't a traditional CISO talk episode. I'll have you on a traditional CISO talk episode, and I'm gonna dig there because I think that's one of the things that most CISOs sometimes, as they get further and further along in their careers, we start to forget the foundational stuff of forensics, incident response, pen testing capabilities, and so we're often very much stuck in kind of a knowledge rut where we stopped kind of reading or stopped educating ourselves, or we do our CPEs, we go to a conference to get signed off so we can get our CPEs to maintain our certs, but maybe we don't always really pay attention unless it's
because we're always multitasking or something.
Well, I mean, the one thing about that I tell veterans about a security job is if you haven't started a family in the military and you want to start a family within security, you make sure that you explain to your spouse, whoever that is, that this is a 24/7 365 job. And that sometimes there's the 3 a.m. phone call, and sometimes you're going to go to the office and something's going to happen midday and you're not going to come home until the next morning. And it's not because you don't want to come home, but it's because we get the job done, right? Like we'll leave at sunrise to go home, shower, eat, change, maybe say hi to our spouse, and then come back to the office a few hours later and work through the day and then go home. And
accomplish the mission.
Right. And so that's the one thing. And I had a very interesting conversation with another person who was on the show where we talked about the purpose. So when you leave the military, one of the greatest downers, right, is the lack of purpose, right? So a lot of times you get sucked into those dead-end jobs, right, in a call center or a help desk or something like that. And you don't find purpose, and then that leads to a snowball effect, right? Alcohol, drugs, and then we know where things go from there. PTSD, severe PTSD, mental health symptoms that increase rather than decrease because of a feeling of productiveness and a feeling of self-worth. And so security does fill kind of those check marks quickly. You're working for a purpose. You've been in financial services a predominant part of your career. You're protecting our financial system. You're protecting money, which has a serious impact on our national security, right? I mean, the cybersecurity battle of today is people trying to create the greatest transfer of wealth in human history by launching cyber attacks against organizations and institutions in order to gain the financial upper hand. I mean, that's just the bottom line of what this is. I kind of stopped talking in data terms and started talking about the greatest transfer of wealth in human history. And people go, well, what do you mean? And I go, well, let me explain, right? But I felt like that's helping. That's a point. Do you feel the same way about security? Do you feel like it has a higher purpose that kind of keeps you at the same level as kind of you are a Marine, and so as a Marine, you're always kind of looking for a sense of purpose.
Yeah, no, and you bring up a great point because I was chasing money for the earliest part of my career. I thought success equaled money. And one thing when I mentor people is I say, make sure you understand what you want, right? Money for me is a detractor, but it's not a motivator, right? So I'm not going to go into I know now personally not to go into a job because of money. I know that it needs to be a certain amount, but for me, I need to feel like I'm accomplishing something, and I need to feel like the organization I belong to is helping the world, right? And every person has to select that for themselves. So for instance, I'm in the credit union industry, which their goal is people helping people, right? That really means a lot to me, and I feel like it's part of a mission that I can really get behind. And in financial services, right? You're protecting people's ability to spend time with their family and so forth. So absolutely, and I've had friends who have gone into different roles and they were frustrated because it's either they didn't understand the company's mission or they didn't believe in it, but you can tell when somebody's not fully engaged. And that's why, I learned, everyone makes mistakes. I made a couple of missteps in my career where I focused on money, and when I changed how I approach things and I focused on the mission and what makes me feel good and what makes me feel like I've accomplished something, it changed my entire life. Like the organization I'm in now feels very much like the camaraderie that you get in the military. It feels like, okay, we're here to help people. That's our primary focus. It's not about just making money. So you have to find that for yourself, and if your motivation is money, right, just make sure that it doesn't overtake other things, because there has to be balance across the board. So the short answer is yes.
No, it's a great answer, because when we leave the service, we're constantly, the defense industry is almost quick to jump on us and offer us a blinding amount of money, but sometimes you realize there's no purpose in that. So you kind of want to have purpose. And I think InfoSec gives us purpose, because what we're trained to do is done, on a virtual level. Yeah, we're in a battle in a virtual kind of cyber world. And there's a little bit of that, rivalry, that opposition that drives you. That's a little, you're kind of used to it in the military, because there's an opponent somewhere out there, and there's, strategic thinking and creative thinking and out of the box. And, there's aspects to that I think are just like they fit for a veteran.
Yeah, absolutely agree. And we're being in security is about protecting. Right. And there's that natural sense of wanting to protect others, protect, what your country, protect. And security is all about protecting. And I 100% agree. That's why I think it's a great field for veterans. So
as we're almost out of time, and I'm trying to keep these episodes under 30 minutes, I'm trying hard, but with people like you, Paul, it's so hard, right? Like I just want to go into like a full-fledged CISO talk episode, but we'll have to record a whole different one for that. So let me ask you this. As we wrap up, what's one thing you loved about the military service? One thing that, kind of still stays with you till today?
I'll give you two, but I'll make them very quick. One is the ability to serve others and to serve something higher than myself resonated with me. As a selfish teenager, changing my whole perspective, and the Marine Corps changed my entire life. It's really made me a better person, I think, and I'm still learning to be a better person. We all can do better, right? The other thing is, the quality of people you work with from all the services, right? The Air Force, Navy, Army, right? And my fellow Marines, these are people who care. They're high quality individuals. They're people who want to do amazing things. And I really love that sense of camaraderie and the sense of mission that we all had. When I would go on an Army base or an Air Force base, or with my sailor comrades on ship, I always felt like I was part of a bigger family, right? And there was a little bit of rivalry, like you would have in any family, but it was a friendly, hey, we all care about each other, we got each other's backs, and we'll do what's right by each other. And I look for organizations that have that now, but in the military, it's a whole different world, and totally loved it, and it was amazing.
Yeah, the brotherhood is unanimously, when I ask that question, the one thing that everyone talks about, brotherhood. Yeah. And it's so true, because you see that at every conference, like security conference, right? The veterans were huddled in some place, having conversations. We're at some restaurant or some bar, and we're, and then everyone else is everywhere else. And not to say that we're fractured as a cybersecurity community, and not to dismiss other people who are not veterans who are in the cybersecurity community, but we always seem to find each other.
Yeah. You can tell by how people talk or whatnot. But, the thing I love too is that you get a lot of cybersecurity practitioners who weren't in the military, And there's that same kind of approach and thinking. So I mean, it feels very comfortable to even talk to other cybersecurity professionals who aren't in the military, because there's that same sense of purpose and so forth.
Well, you look at CISOs, right? I mean, it's we reach out to each other and we try to support each other as much as possible, and information sharing and just, hey, I'm looking to buy something like this. What are you using? What do you recommend? And having those conversations, those typically help you do your role a little bit better and help you avoid mistakes. And I mean, that's why I started the CISO Talk podcast, right? Because I was sick of people talking about technology and products and solutions. And I'm like, yeah, but technology doesn't solve all of our problems. And technology definitely isn't solving our biggest problem, which is, program building, hiring, retaining, the human element, the human aspect. There's real leadership skills that are needed for that. And, I always say there's two kinds of CISOs, right? There's the people who are people like you and I who are able to talk technologically, but also able to be human. And we have some other people who are technologists, the smartest people on the planet. Some of the smartest people I know would never come on my podcast. And I want them to, because they're so smart, but they're not people.
Yeah. And it's a tough, it's easy to just focus on the technology. I always tell my team, technology only makes a bad process bad faster. So focus on process, focus on the people and the relationships, and the technology will follow.
Yeah, like Gary Hayslip says it, like people, process, technology, right? Like just focus on that, but start with the people, then leave technology to the last thing. Like what can I do? People, process, technology. It's not technology, process, people.
Yeah, absolutely. Because people are just like the military, right? You can have all the greatest technological systems and the greatest weapons in the world. If you don't have good leaders and the ability to think freely and, good just people, you're going to fail. I mean, it's been proven historically time and time again.
Yeah, it's funny. A lot of veterans, when we talk about gun battles, right? With terror groups, and especially, in the most recent conflicts. And they go, these guys will come and shoot at you, and they go and they're shooting and they're not hitting anything. Right. And then we deploy our weapons and we're like they're done with, and that comes to training, and that comes to people, and that comes to training, and that comes to people. Right. And, and at the end of the day,
technology is just a tool, right? A screwdriver is not going to make you a better, a better mechanic. Right. You got to have the right person to work the tools.
Yeah. And if anyone knows me, knows I can't fix nothing anyway. Like my wife, when something breaks in the house, she's just like, don't touch it. You're literally, I can't even put a door on hinges right sometimes.
Because you'll multiply the cost. They have to fix the damage you created in addition to what needs fixed, it sounds like.
Absolutely true. 100%. 100%. Like I'm not a fixer upper kind of guy. Like I try to be. Like I've been I watched Bob the Builder, I've watched Home Improvement, I come from
the right base there.
Yeah, I come from a family of carpenters. Like my grandpa was a carpenter, my uncle, my cousins. I'm like the one guy in the family that when he'd go to the carpentry shop, people would be like, make him wear a yellow vest, put a helmet and gloves on him, because I've literally cut my finger on a table saw once. Like I was cutting wood and I cut my finger on a table saw.
Oh my! Well, but if they give you an Atari 65 or a 65XE or an 800, you can make magic happen.
I can,
and that's the value you bring.
Right? I'd go to my uncle and be like, "Why are all your invoices on paper? Let's computerize the business. Let's take stock of our wood and all that stuff." And I'm like, "Hey, we can get rid of sawdust. Sawdust people will pay us money for sawdust. Let's put it in barrels." And he goes, "Who would pay us money for sawdust?" I'm like, "There's people who need sawdust. They'll pay money for it."
Yeah.
And he'd be like, "Really?" And I'm like, "Yeah, more income."
No one can argue with that.
Yeah, it's crazy. So we're out of time. We're 4 minutes over, but I can't get enough of Paul. So we'll have Paul on a CISO Talk episode. So look it up and make sure to tune in for the full episode where we'll talk a little bit about veteran affairs, but really we're going to focus on Paul's career and cyber and leadership and all the fun stuff that go with that. Paul, thank you for coming on the podcast, man, and thank you for your service. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, and thank you.
Guys, Veteran November, another awesome episode down. So many more to go, so many veterans to highlight. Turnout's been awesome. I hope you've enjoyed the series thus far. I know there's so many more stories I want to tell, but we're starting with and trying to give you the variety. Never lose hope. You can reach out to myself and I'll volunteer Paul if you need help, you need direction, you need guidance. I know that I volunteer my time. I know so many other veterans that do that. Every single person that's been on the show is willing to take half an hour out of their day to help you just find yourself. So never feel like you're out of hope or there's no hope for you at all. We're all in this together, and InfoSec's a great place for you to find meaning and have some economic relief. And so we ask you to join our family. Until tomorrow in another episode of Veteran November, folks, make sure you hashtag share these, and I hope we inspire you. Paul, again, thank you so much. We'll be back with more. Until next time, folks, we're signing off. Have a great day and stay cyber safe.
Make sure to subscribe to our podcast and share it with your friends and colleagues. And get all the latest information at cyberhubpodcast.com.